I believe that we will be raising a generation of informed voters. Students are more in tune with their educational need than anybody else. We are the ones subjected to the rule of the state school boards, and by the time we're 18 and allowed to vote, we are no longer part of the education system.
That was Oommen, a junior at West High School. She presented supporting arguments during the House Political Subdivisions Committee meeting last Wednesday for HB 338, a bill she drafted with Representative Joe Briscoe. It would allow local school districts the option to allow 16 and 17-year-old students the right to vote in their school board elections. Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight on should students vote in school board elections. Joining us now live in studio is the person you just heard from, Oommen. Dottie, thank you so much for being here tonight and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Dottie, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? We know that you go to West High School. What role do you serve with the Salt Lake City School District?
Yeah, I'm a junior at West High School and I serve as the student board member for the Salt Lake City School District.
And that's amazing. I understand you're the only student representative on the school board, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's not just no pressure there. That's a pretty big role, and kudos to you. Now, you presented HB 338 alongside Representative Joe Briscoe to the House Political Subdivisions Committee last Wednesday. And it's not often that we get to see a 16-year-old do that on Capitol Hill. What was that experience like for you?
Well, I think that I've definitely never done anything like it, but it was a great experience, so I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to present to the committee.
And for those that didn't get to listen to the committee meeting, all of the lawmakers that were there were just raving about the preparation that went into your presentation. Let's get to the bill now. Why is it important for young people to be able to take part in their school board election? What kind of impact would that have in the long run?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. The first thing is that school boards are primarily there on behalf of students to serve us the best way that they can. We are the largest majority stakeholders for any school board, yet we have no right to vote in who represents our education, which is often the largest race that impacts students most directly. And the third reason would be because we want better functioning education. Education that suits students is the best education of all, and it'll also help boost our youth civic engagement and youth voter turnout.
Now, this bill specifically states 16 and 17-year-olds. Why should the threshold for student voters start at 16 and 17 years old?
Well, I think one of the first reasons is cognitive capability. 16 and 17-year-olds are just as cognitively capable as an 18 through 25-year-old. That number starts to shift at age 15, so 16 was a great place to keep it as is, and it also coincides with voter registration ages, so it was a great way to get students pre-registered to vote and to continue that into their lifetimes.
Not to mention, 16 and 17-year-olds can work a full-time job, pay taxes, own a business, drive with supervision, register to vote, and join the armed forces. Now, what are the two primary reasons why young people fail to vote, such as in the presidential elections?
The two primary reasons are voter apathy and disengagement. I think that when students see such a large race like the presidential election where you have tens of millions of people voting, it's very hard for us to see ourselves in those numbers. And so giving us something that has a direct line of impact like a local school board race, nothing gets more local than a local school board race. I think that's really going to show us that, you know, we have the ability to make a difference and all it takes is one ballot.
Do you know what the percentage is for the amount of young people ages 18 to 29 who are registered to vote, and where does Utah rank in the nation for that?
Well, Utah actually ranks second to dead last in the entire United States in terms of youth voter turnout. In the 2018 election, our turnout was 16%, and right now only 14% of 16, 17-year-olds are pre-registered to vote, so that number doesn't look like it's going to be improving anytime soon.
Now, Dottie, hold that thought. We have to take a quick commercial break, but when we return, we'll resume our In Focus discussion on whether students should vote in school board elections.
When voting and the importance of voting are taught in conjunction in schools, students are 40% more likely to vote and continue to vote throughout their lifetimes. Utah is already getting that civic education piece under control. Now we just need to back it up with action.
Should local school districts have the option to allow 16 and 17-year-old students to vote in their school board elections? Well, a new bill on Capitol Hill is addressing this very question. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight. Before the break, Dottie Oommen, a junior at West High School who helped draft HB 338 with Representative Joel Briscoe, joined us for a live discussion. We pick up now right where we left off. Dottie, what would you say to people who believe that teen brains are too underdeveloped to vote, that they have lower maturity, interest, and knowledge than adults?
Well, I would tell you first that the data doesn't back that up. The data says that a 16-year-old is equally as capable as a 22-year-old. I am here today as a 16-year-old, and if I did not believe that my peers were capable, then I wouldn't be sitting here. I know that I'm capable, I know that my friends are capable, I know that my sister's capable, so I think that this bill really stands for giving students that responsibility and respect of being able to participate actively in their educations.
Now here's another concern. Could students be used as political pawns for teacher unions or education reformers?
Well, I think the answer to that is a pretty firm no. There's already a voting population in high schools who are 18 and able to vote. There hasn't been any widespread influence on behalf of teachers or teachers' unions and education reformers. And I think there are two reasons behind that. One is responsibility and respect to teachers. I think they very clearly understand the ramifications of their incredible profession and know that it's not their place to influence students. And the second is that if you've ever met a teenager, you know that we're not easily convinced. So they're kind of hard pressed to get students to align with the political candidate of their choosing.
Now what about property taxes? Would it be unfair to allow students to vote on them if they don't pay them?
I think that property taxation and voting being tied together is a strong misconception. Utah especially has one of the highest teen employment rates in the nation. We have 53% of teens who are currently employed right now. We have skin in the game. I think the property taxation argument has been struck down once in the Supreme Court over any poll taxation form, and once again in the Louisiana First Circuit Court, which decided that those who do not pay property tax do not love their community, love their children any less than someone who does. We're legally barred from owning or paying property taxes as teenagers, but we're still the primary majority stakeholders for any school district, and I think that we deserve a voice. And property taxation doesn't really fall into that argument in any way because we have a representative democracy, and that means that we are all equally represented.
You are just so wise for your age. What's the fiscal note that is attached to this bill? What would this amount, well, why would this amount be worth it?
Well, the fiscal note attached to the bill is really minimal, actually. It's $17,000. I think engaging students and boosting our youth voter turnout down from 16% to as high as we can get it is well worth the price. $17,000 is not a steep price to pay to get our students engaged with their education.
I'd like to talk about local control. How does this bill provide the flexibility to each school district, no matter if they want to allow students to vote in their school board elections or not?
Well, I will tell you that I have tried to pass a bill. I have served on a school board, and both of those are not easy jobs. So I wanted this bill to reflect the respect that students should have for their elected officials. And one way to do that was to give flexibility to school boards to have that autonomy and right of choice in deciding whether or not this would be a great fit for them. If District X doesn't think that they're ready to implement the bill now, then that's okay. Maybe they want to watch District Y implement the bill first and see how it goes to see if it'll be successful in their district. And I think that flexibility is something that the Utah legislature looks for often, is to really give local school boards that right of local control and local choice, because that's what students want to learn as well. I want this bill to teach students about local choice and local control, and to teach them that local choices matter, down the ballot races matter, and that their voices matter.
Dottie, last that we heard, the bill passed the committee 6-4. What's the latest update on the bill now?
Well, I will tell you that the bill actually did fail this afternoon, somewhat disappointingly, but we will be back. I think my message to anyone watching is that this is just the beginning. Neither I nor any of the students I represent are done with this bill. We will be back next year to try and pass the bill again. I think that A lot of students are very excited to see this bill happen. They're very excited to receive a ballot in the mail, to be able to vote in their local school board race. And I myself will not stop until my sister receives her own ballot and she's able to participate in her education.
Wow, I love the tenacity and the persistence and all the work that you have put into this bill. You had some final words there. Anything else that you'd like to say that we haven't addressed yet in this discussion?
I don't think so. I just want all the students to know that House Bill 338 is dedicated to you. It's dedicated to the students of Utah for their immense tenacity and strength during this year. And I expect that we will eventually have our siblings have the right to cast a ballot in their local school board races, and I won't stop till we do.
You've been hearing from Dottie Oommen, a junior at West High School who helped draft HB 338 with Representative Joe Briscoe. Dottie, I know you've heard this many times, but we are so impressed with you. Thank you for being here tonight. It was great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, you heard the supporting arguments. Now it's time to hear the other side. HB 338 passed committee with a vote of 6-4 last week. Hear from one of the lawmakers who voted no about what concerns he has about allowing 16 and 17-year-old students to vote in school board elections.
One of my concerns is that if that voting rate for 18-year-olds is poor, I guess I'm going to assume that the voting rate for 16, 17-year-olds may be even worse.
That was Representative Steve Christiansen during the House Political Subdivisions Committee meeting last Wednesday, expressing his concerns about HB 338, which would allow local school districts the option to allow 16 and 17-year-old students the right to vote in their school board elections. Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on should students vote in school board elections. Earlier, you heard supporting arguments from the student who helped draft HB 338. We now turn to the concerns for the bill. Joining us now live in studio is Representative Steve Christiansen, who was one of the 4 lawmakers who voted no in committee to advance this bill forward. Representative Christiansen, we know it's a busy time for you. Thank you for being here tonight and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rosie. It's great to be here with you. And I was watching backstage as Dottie was sitting here talking about her bill. One of the most impressive young ladies I have ever met in my life, quite frankly. We were just completely blown away on that Political Subdivisions Committee meeting where she presented.
That's actually my first question for you. I wanted to get your reaction when you heard her presentation to the committee last Wednesday. In your time up on Capitol Hill, have you ever seen someone as young as her present to committee like she did last Wednesday?
Never in my life. I can't believe how she just blew us all away. She was so well organized, so articulate. She knew her stuff, just front and back. There wasn't a question that she couldn't ask. If it wasn't for her, this would have been a really easy decision, but she made it much more difficult, quite honestly.
Now, you were one of 4 committee members who voted no to advance the bill, but you did provide your reasonings before the vote. You said there were 3 things that concerned you, and I'd like to go over all of them. The first one was about poor voter participation rates of young students. We heard that soundbite from you at the beginning of the show. We heard you talking about that, and tell us a little bit more about that specific concern of yours.
Yeah, I think in the previous segment, Dottie talked about that as you were discussing that with her. I think Dottie mentioned that we have either the 2nd or the 3rd lowest participation rates among 18-year-olds in the country. And if it's that low among 18-year-olds, my concern is that if we were to open up the voting right and give that to 16 and 17-year-olds, it could potentially be even lower, maybe even much lower. And quite honestly, that concerns me.
Your second concern was about the cherished right to vote. You said that you feared giving that right to younger and younger populations, it may lose that value. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yes, and this is one of my key concerns. We know, those of us that are parents, sometimes when we withhold a privilege, the value of that privilege increases in our kids' eyes. And the right to vote, quite frankly, is the most cherished right that we have as citizens here in this country. In fact, that right to vote, exercising that right to vote, allows us to achieve the protection of all of our other rights. Samuel Adams mentioned, and I'll just quote him, he said, "When we vote, we are executing one of the most solemn trusts in human society." And I wonder how many of us pause long enough to realize that the right to vote is indeed a solemn trust. It's a cherished privilege. And quite honestly, we need to make sure that it is well understood, appreciated, and used the way it's intended.
Your third concern was in relation to civics. You used the example of 74% of senior citizens could pass the U.S. citizenship test without practice, but only 20% of those 45 years and younger could actually do it. Let's discuss that and what you meant when you said we needed to fix this foundation first.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those statistics. And quite honestly, those statistics are very troubling. And they're not just troubling to Republicans or Democrats, they're troubling for both of us because this is our country. It's obvious that generationally something has happened. If 74% of senior citizens could pass that U.S. citizenship test, but only 20% of those under the age of 45 could pass the same test, there's something going on with younger and younger generations that concerns me. It really troubles me. It has to do with civics education in our schools. It has to do with civics conversations around the dinner table. And quite honestly, if you were to dig into those statistics even more and read the research that has been done, there are very few people that even know the 3 branches of government, for example, or could name one of those cherished rights that we are promised in the First Amendment to the Constitution.
Now, is there anything that could be modified or changed in the bill that would be a good compromise for you? Is there anything that would make you support the bill?
As you mentioned, the bill did come for a vote on the House floor just before I came here this evening. It did fail on the House floor, and as soon as it failed and I cast my vote, I saw Dottie just standing right out the House chamber. And so I walked back there and talked to her for just a minute, just to make sure that she wasn't destroyed, but of course she's so strong, she wasn't. Now, in terms of is there anything that could be changed about the bill that would cause me to vote differently? At this point in time, there really is not. The last concern that I just expressed to you with regards to civics education and that foundation that is critical, right now that foundation is not solid because the majority of our population don't understand the kind of government that we have, why it's such a privilege and blessing to have that kind of government. And so until we're able to get that foundation to become rock solid and solve that underlying problem, I would probably continue to struggle for some time.
Representative Christiansen, what can young Utahns and young Utahns like Dottie take away from this experience? What would your message be for them?
Well, number one, look up to Dottie. My goodness, look to her as a role model, somebody who is willing to speak up, to step out, to take on a challenge, a challenge that she believes in, a challenge that she's passionate about. Look up to her as a role model. Number two, continue to participate actively in your community. Number three, when it comes to social studies and government and U.S. history classes, pay attention, learn all that you can, and really come to appreciate this amazing country that we live in. Those are the kinds of things that will hold our youth in good stead as they continue to grow and progress.
Very encouraging words. Representative Christiansen, we have time for final words. You said a lot there. Is there anything that you might wanted to have mentioned that maybe we haven't discussed yet in this conversation?
You know, I have spent quite a bit of time on this show talking about the importance of civics education here in the state of Utah and some of the challenges that we face. One thing that I would like to mention is that this is my top priority as a legislator. Over the next interim, over the next number of months, I'm going to be working with a number of stakeholders to identify ways to strengthen civics and history education here in the state of Utah, so that we can repair that foundation that right now I have indicated is cracked. And so I look forward to working with those stakeholders, and I just plead with parents and other community members to engage in this same effort.
You've been hearing from Representative Steve Christiansen from West Jordan. Representative, thank you for being here tonight to provide your perspective. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rosie. Good to be with you.